Here's everything you need to know about Hellfire Flame and whether or not he is worth pulling for, so let's get into the pros and cons about him. So for his pros, he is a great support unit with Bomb, as he will provide additional defensive buffs onto Bomb's shields, which will become super handy, as he will be able to counter the upcoming Dot era. Speaking of which, his support skills also absorbs Dot, which will counter ATT, as he converts Bomb's shields into an orange shield that will reduce the amount of dot damage that can be inflicted onto Bomb's shields and for his entire team, so he will work very well in that regard. He is also a great duelist for Bomb's core, as we need one of every type in order to fulfill for Bomb's core, so if you don't have Sonic V2, Hellish Fire is a great alternative. And finally, he is great in PvP, as he will be able to counter all those ATT keepsake users, so he will be very good to use if you're going for a defensive PvP lineup. And going through his cons, he does require massive investment, up to 400 plus sacks. That is because he is quite a squishy character, and what I mean by that is that he is quite a weak character. He can be picked off pretty easily, so you'd want to get as much HP into him as possible. His passive deactivates if he dies, so this is also why he needs massive investment. You need to put so much HP into him like you did for Genos, because without his passive you're basically going to die and then he's just a waste of a unit. And finally, he is useless without Bomb, so if he's not in the same lineup with Bomb, he is absolutely useless, especially in villain PvP, as Bomb is a hero and Hellfire is a villain, so he wouldn't really be the greatest to use in your villain lineup, so he's pretty bad in that regard. And because of that, his meta span is quite short, because Bomb's core should only be lasting for about 6 months or so. He's only really useful with Bomb, otherwise he's a pretty bad unit to use with anyone else. So, going through his attack skills, for his basic attack, he attacks a single target for 130% of his attack, and he will also increases his own max HP by 20% for 2 rounds. And for his ultimate attack, he attacks an entire row with 3 hits for 30% of the main target's max HP, where this damage cannot exceed more than 30% of Hellfire's max HP, so there is a cap to this. He also inflicts burn onto the main target for 2 rounds, where it will deal 100% of his attack as dot damage. And if you manage to get his keepsake, you'll unlock his ultra ultimate attack, where he will be able to deal damage for 40% of the main target's max HP, where this damage cannot exceed more than 40% of Hellfire's max HP. So realistically, it doesn't really provide that much, his keepsake, so I wouldn't really recommend pulling for his keepsake. But his ultimate attack does scale off the main target's max HP, which is a very new feature and can work well against a very tanky front row unit, so this is quite an interesting feature to use. He can be very useful. So going through his passive skills, so for his passive at the start of battle, he grants shield boost to himself and surrounding allies. And what this shield boost does is that the existing shields will become orange. So these orange shields will be able to absorb dots, injury, internal injury, and charge damage, which will be able to last for 2 rounds. So this is how he will be able to synergize very well with Bomb, as he'll be able to convert 4 shields into orange shields, which will be able to absorb those additional types of damage which I just stated previously. Also, at the beginning of each round, he grants tenacity to his entire column, based on 20% of his max HP. And like I stated before, his passive deactivates if he dies, so you cannot let him die, or else his passive and Bomb shields will become a lot more vulnerable. If you manage to get his 5-star limit break, at the start of battle he'll grant shield boost to all allies, and he'll grant tenacity to his entire column based on 25% of his max HP. And if you manage to get his 5p awakening, he'll be able to grant shield boost to all allies that would last for 3 rounds, as well as the tenacity given to his entire column being based on 30% of his max HP. So this is what makes him very strong, is that he will synergize very well with Bomb due to his passive. So just keep in mind that he will make your Bomb lineup very tanky and very defensive, and can counter against those heavy ATT hitters. Now going through his enhancements, so for his talent page, his page 3 talents are not important since it does not include unyielding, so you don't really need to push for page 3, so I'd recommend to at least go up to page 2. For his damage sigils, you can use pain or piercing sigils. You can use sword, but he shouldn't be your top priority, so that's why I didn't include sword sigils. So don't use sword. And for his support sigils, you can use vitality or tenacity sigils. So for his limit break, at a minimum, you would want to get his 5 stars in order to grant the orange shield buff to all allies, as those units that are not in those shields will be able to be picked off pretty easily by ATT, so you definitely would want to get his 5 star as soon as possible if you do pull for him, so just keep that in mind. Now going through his awakening, at a minimum get him up to 3-star awakening to attain his block rate and block buffs, and at a maximum you can get him up to 4p in order to get that extra crit resistance to just make him a bit more tankier. Now you don't need to 5p him, but I would probably only do that for the whales, as the orange shields will last for 3 rounds. So throughout the bomb meta he will be very useful to use, as your team will be able to survive a lot longer. But if you're not a whale, or I wouldn't really recommend for most people to get his 5p awakening, so I would just leave it at that. But his 5p is pretty good, just not a top priority. You should be focusing your 5p materials on other characters, especially with upcoming SSR plus units such as Carnage Kabuto. You definitely want to get his 5p over Hellfire Flame. Now moving through his gears, so for his gear sets you would either want a suit, a battle, or a magic set, so you can finally use those gears to good use with him. And with his gear stats you would want all of them to have HP and HP bonus. In order to make him as tanky as possible, you need his HP as high as you can. And for his buff gears, all of them should have HP, with your villain gear having HP bonus and flat HP, your duelist gear having HP and block rate, and your demon gear having flat HP and bonus damage reduction. And if you manage to get an augmentation from upgrading your demon gear, getting a tenacity augmentation would work best with Hellfire Flame. Now block can also work well to make him survive for even longer, so that is also a good alternative. So the main takeaways from this unit, that he is a great counter against those force field and charge team lineups, as his orange shields will make bomb shields a lot more beefier, so he can counter those ATT users or those upcoming SSR plus units such as Carnage Kabuto and Metal Bat Plus, because they do have charge. He doesn't completely counter them, but he can reduce the damage taken from them, so it is quite useful. But he is a whale unit because you need a shit ton of HP into him. I really wouldn't recommend pulling for him if you don't plan to spend too much money or put too much investment into him, because sacks are quite limited and you should be focusing all those sacks onto your heavy DPS characters. He's only useful with bomb, so he does have a short meta as I stated previously, because without bomb he is absolutely useless. He doesn't really provide that much utility for your team, and he can be picked off very easily. And finally, Sonic is the better duelist for the upcoming bomb era. So if you do already have Sonic, then you should use Sonic over Hellfire Flame, because if you decide to use two duelists, that could be a bit of an overkill, as there are such better units you can use other than Hellfire Flame, but it's totally up to you. If you don't have Sonic, then Hellfire Flame is a good alternative. We don't know if he is free or not, so if he is free, then that will be very good. Otherwise, if he's not, some good alternatives for your duelists can be Zombie Man or Magic Trick Man to fill for that duelist slot for bomb. So, should you pull for Hellfire Flame? So for free-to-play low spenders, we are still unsure whether or not he will be completely free or be locked behind a 120 black ticket limited banner. So if he is free, definitely use him. If not, then skip for him, since you want to get as many SSR plus units as possible. For Dolphins, I would probably also recommend to skip for him. You can use other duelist alternatives, or if you have Sonic, you can definitely use Sonic over Hellfire. If you don't have Sonic, you can use Zombie Man or Magic Trick Man. Don't sleep on Magic Trick Man, he is quite useful. He will reduce bonus damage, so he will work well against those ATT users. And for Whales, he is a good pull. You can use him. He isn't super necessary if you do have Sonic, since you do want Sonic to be as fast as possible, especially for PvP. But Hellfire Flame is great to use if you plan to have a more defensive lineup in your PvP modes. So you definitely want to use him, but make sure you have to put heavy investment into him. So all those sacks that you put into Genos, you might want to kind of put into Hellfire, or at least some of them into Hellfire. My personal preference is that I'm going to skip for Hellfire since I don't plan to highly invest into him, so I do want to save my sacks for other units such as Drive Knight or other characters for like SSR Plus or ATT. So I will skip for Hellfire if he is even for free. So a quick update on the SSR timeline. Yes, I'm going back to this timeline for whenever I review the 3 remaining SSRs that we still do not have. However, there have been rumors that Soiru might be the rate up unit for the October rate up heroic banner. So hopefully that is the case, and look out for my future video about him. Now with Pig God and Hellish Blizzard, I imagine that they'll be doing the exact same with them, where one of them will instead be during November and one during December. So if you wanted to save for any of these units, then save your heroic vouchers starting from now. Anyways, that wraps up the end of the video. I'd love to give shoutouts to all of my amazing YouTube members, so special thanks to my X tier members being Gamma, Blackshot, Joe, Swift, and Oliver, and my 4 Z tier members being Dragon, Red Skunk, Jared, and Solionaire. Thank you very much for all of your additional support and making this type of content possible. So anyways, that's all for today, and I will catch you all next time.